Hello, and welcome to The Joy of CX. My name's David Cox, and in this series of podcasts, we aim to tackle everything you wanted to know about CX, but were afraid to ask. So maybe we should start by tackling the most basic question of them all. What on earth is customer experience? What's it all about, and why should we care about it? It's one of those terms that's been around for quite a while now, and means an awful lot of different things to different people. So let me just share my take on it. And for me, it comes down to a very simple concept. That simple idea is that customer experience is everything that determines how a customer feels about an organization. And that word feel is really important. It's very much an emotional thing. And what that means is that every way a company interacts with their customers contributes to the sense of the experience and therefore contributes to the way that people feel about the company. I say this very deliberately because there is still out there, and I do come across this almost day in, day out, there's still this lingering idea that customer experience is almost a synonym for customer service. That customer experience is what happens when you call a contact center, what happens when you walk into a store. And whilst those things are important, they're definitely not the be-all and end-all. They're not the only thing that determines how we feel about an organization. So, if you think about it from your own perspective as a human being, and maybe even using a kind of net promoter score idea of how likely I would be to recommend a company to a friend, if you think about what you would bear in mind when you're thinking about making a recommendation, what are those things that we take into account? Well, first of all, it is true that we often think about our day-to-day interactions. When we call a contact center, what happens when we receive a bill, our experience of walking to a store, how well the app works, all of these sorts of things. For these day-to-day interactions, we tend to think about how frictionless or painful they are, how time-consuming or energy-sapping they are. We've all had that experience of having to kind of gird your loins before you do battle with a phone company or a bank. But that's not all. Secondly, we would also be thinking about our sense of value for money. Would I recommend a company if I didn't think they were good value for money? So that sense of value for money really translates into the kind of commercial relationship that the company has with its customers. So, do I feel like they're fair with me? Has the company got its hand in my pocket and is desperately trying to get my money out while my job is to try and prevent them? Those sorts of things really, really impact on how we feel about an organization and are therefore fundamental to the experience of customers. So value for money, the commercial relationship with the customer, is absolutely critical to how we feel about them. And then finally, there is the kind of intangible, what you might think of in terms of the kind of brand essence of the organization, how they position themselves, how we feel about them as a character. We'll see as we go through the podcast that from my perspective, it really helps to think of a company as a human being. So companies have personalities, and how we feel about companies is determined by that personality. So these are things that we really, really need to think about. The personality that we present, the values that we present to the customer, these are things that really affect how we feel about them. To use some obvious examples, Harley Davidson gives off a kind of rebel vibe, Aston Martin's for would-be James Bonds, Apple, certainly in its earlier incarnations, appealed to the kind of creative outsider and so on. So it's really, really important for companies to think about the personality that they transmit and to make sure that personality embodies everything else that we talked about. Value for money fits, the day-to-day interactions fit with that sense of personality and so on. So to me, customer experience, as I said, is everything that determines how we feel about an organization, which is really that combination of day-to-day interaction, commercial value relationship, and the intangible brand essence. All of those three things have to come together. And that's why when we're looking to be more customer-centric, we have to think about absolutely every aspect of a business. It's not just an issue of fixing the customer service, answering the phone quicker, getting problems resolved faster, delivering on time, and so on. It's really about thinking about everything we do and creating an experience for customers that delivers value to them. And this is the critical issue. It's all about delivering something that's valuable to the customer. And it's the customer that determines what they value, which is why the start point of the story has to be what matters most to our customers. We have to start from their perspective and resist the temptation to think about our business and what we offer. Before we embark on this journey towards customer centricity together across this series of podcasts, I think I should probably explain a little bit about my background and why I wanted to share my passion for CX. As you might tell from my grey hair and the slightly dodgy 70s references at the beginning, I've been around the block a few times. I'm what they euphemistically call a seasoned professional. For the last 20 years or so, I've been working with leading organisations across the world to help them to take that complex journey towards fully embracing and embedding customer centricity at their core. So in this podcast series, I wanted to share with you what I've learned over those 20 years, what works and what doesn't, and hopefully go some way towards demystifying what can be a very complex subject. I've worked primarily in service-related sectors, ones where there's an ongoing service relationship between the organisation and their customers, and also across multiple geographies. I've worked with global players such as Vodafone and Ooredoo in the telecom sector, Bupa in health insurance, DAZN in the media industry, as well as with more local players such as Nextel, a mobile operator in Brazil, ICE, another mobile operator in Norway, and Banco BV, the largest private bank in Brazil. While a lot of my work has been predominantly in the B2C world, I've also worked with B2B organisations such as Colt, a European-wide technology services provider. During the time that I've worked with these clients, I've developed a comprehensive transformation framework that really breaks down the complex and sometimes daunting transformational journey into a step-by-step approach that brings together every aspect of the journey into a coherent whole that really does put the customer right at the heart of the organisation, at the core operation of the enterprise, right at the centre of the strategy. As with everyone, I've got an origin story that led me to this point, to dedicating my life to customer experience. If I go right back to the beginning, I started life as an accountant, which means I've never actually lost the basic idea that the only goal of any business, and therefore of customer experience itself, is to be profitable. For me, CX is the fundamental route to long-term and sustainable profitability, and not some kind of nice-to-have that we need to pay lip service to. I spent several years in program management honing my change skills and feeding my fascination not only for how to change things, but mostly for how you change mindsets and attitudes. I then spent nearly 10 years as part of the senior management team of a company called Ono in Spain, which we took from a startup to being the main competitor to Telefonica as a result of the liberalisation of the Spanish telecoms market in the early noughties. In Ono, I was responsible for everything that wasn't the day-to-day operation of the organisation, so program office, operational excellence, strategy, and so on. As you might expect from a startup, the initial focus for Ono was on aggressive acquisition, and we grew very rapidly. And then, as with a lot of startups, we got to the point where we were effectively running to stand still. We're spending loads of money to attract new customers, only to lose as many customers at the back end that we were gaining at the front. So we became aware that we needed to grow up. We needed to make the serious transition from focus on acquisition to core focus on really looking after the customers that we already had. And that was my challenge, and it ignited my passion for customer and all things customer experience, because I had to work out how to engineer that transition of the business, not just from an operational level, but as a culture towards an organisation that put the customer at the heart. So that was the challenge that kick-started my search for the magic formula, the recipe that would refocus a highly sales-driven organisation to a service-first mentality. I did look around the consultancies at the time to see if there were any that could help to drive the change, but there were none at that time that could really demonstrate real experience and proven success. So possibly with the arrogance of youth, I set about developing my own solution. And it was very successful, not only significantly improving all customer satisfaction metrics, but most importantly, dramatically reducing churn rates. So having been through that journey with Ono and realizing that I'd created a formula that worked, I started to realize there were many other organizations across the world that were facing similar challenges. Very often I come across businesses that have gone through a strategic review, have brought in one of the big strat consultancies to build their strategy for them, and had differentiate through customer experience or be the most customer-centric in the industry as one of the key pillars of their strategy. The consultants typically then deliver their 100-slide deck and ride off into the sunset, and leave the company wondering how to effectively put that into practice. And that's really what I've been focused on for the last 20 or so years. The practical reality of taking companies through that journey to true customer centricity. So in this series of podcasts, what I'm hoping to do is to take you through that journey, to share a lot of the lessons that I've learned along the way, to share what has worked, what I've learned hasn't worked. I have made an awful lot of mistakes along the way, and to try to explain the key steps that an organization needs to go through, as well as the kind of subtle learnings that go behind all of that methodology. Those are the things that really, really make the difference. Along the way, I hope to bring in a lot of examples from companies I've worked with, and also to talk to some of the key people that I've worked with in those organizations, so we can bring the perspective from the CEO, from the in-house customer experience director, and so on, to really start to bring to life and to give a sense of what it takes to transform an organization and what that brings both to the bottom line and to the culture and operation of a business. So I'm going to leave it there for the moment. We've opened the door to what customer experience is, and what I'd like to do in the next episode is go into a little bit more detail about the start of the journey. Why do companies start down this road, or why should they? What are the key triggers and symptoms of an organization that should be embracing a customer-first mentality, and how do they manifest themselves? So many thanks for listening, and hope to see you soon.